This video is intended only for mature audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. This happened the summer I turned 21, and being female, it taught me more than a few lessons. The most important being to never let my guard down while away from home, no matter who I'm with. Now, before I get to the main story, some back history is in order here. That summer, my friends, let's call them Mel and Dee, and I found out that our absolute favorite country singer was coming to the West Virginia State Fair to perform. We looked up the ticket prices for as close as we could get, and they were, to say the least, a little out of our price range, but we didn't care. Somehow, we got the money for those tickets. Needless to say, that summer we worked our behinds off just for the money for those tickets. Finally, a few weeks before the concert, I got online and bought 3 tickets for as close as I could get them. It was done. We had reached our goal, and come August, we would be on our way to see our favorite singer of all time. Finally, the day came, and my friends and I loaded up in my Chevy Aveo car and set out for the fairgrounds. We were beyond excited about this. We had the radio playing all our favorite singer's songs, and we were singing along right with him. Before we could officially get out of town, though, I had to stop by the local bank at their ATM and withdraw some cash. We get to the bank parking lot and drive around to the ATM, where we noticed that someone in a truck was using the ATM. So we parked behind them and started our wait for our turn in line. Now, this truck that was in front of me was what we called a good old boy truck. Meaning it was rather old with dents, rust, mismatched paint, lights on top of the cab, and big tires. This is a common sight from where we're from, so we didn't pay much attention to these people. Later on, that would be a mistake. We waited for what seemed like 20 minutes. We saw this guy trying to insert his card quite a few times. My guess was he was having trouble getting money out of the machine or just didn't have enough money. We got impatient, and I was just going to back up and go to another ATM when we got closer to the fairgrounds, but I looked down at my tank and saw my car was nearly out of gas. Great, I thought. The local gas station pumps didn't take my card, so it was either wait for this guy to move or chance it to the next town, which could be about a 30-minute drive. I decided to wait. Another mistake. We waited for what seemed like forever, and this guy just wasn't moving. My friend Dee, being the no-nonsense person she is, got out of my car and walked up to this guy's truck. Oh Lord, here we go, I thought to myself. She was in the middle of letting him have a piece of her mind when he threw the truck down in drive and sped off. I couldn't believe it, but we were so relieved he was gone. I pulled up to the ATM and did my business, and off we went to the local gas station to fill up my car. We get to the gas station, pull in, and we all get out. I started pumping my gas, and the girls went inside to use the restroom and get some snacks for our 3-hour drive to the fairgrounds. I was nearly finished pumping my gas when I heard a loud truck. I raised my head, and lo and behold, there was the same truck that was at the ATM. He pulled in right beside me. Not thinking much of it, I finished with the nozzle, replaced it back, and started to walk towards the store when I heard this deep voice from beside me.
"I'm sorry about earlier, Ma,"
he said. I looked at him and nearly recoiled but caught myself. This guy was 6'1", had a beer gut covered by a sweat-stained t-shirt, a ball cap with wisps of hair that resembled a ponytail coming out of the back. Honestly, I couldn't see the color of his hair. His face and body were covered in dirt and oil. I stood there taking his appearance in for a second and finally snapped out of it long enough to say, it's okay." I turned and power-walked to the store because this guy gave me the creeps. I found the girls loading up on junk food and told them what had just happened. We went to the counter and paid for everything and decided we needed to just go and not worry about him. We walk out of the store towards my car and see that this guy is leaning against the back of it. My heart started beating wildly. What did this guy want, and why was he bothering us? Was it because Dee had given him a piece of her mind, or did he just want to harass 3 chicks? I had no clue and didn't really want to find out. We get to the car, put our snacks inside, and just as Dee starts to open her door to get inside, he steps in front of her. Dee locks gazes with him. He opens her door for her and says,
"Y'all should be careful. 3 young pretty things like yourselves all alone.
I was freaking out inside, but tried not to show it. Dee gets in the car, he slams the door and steps back. Mel and I get in, and as we're about to drive off, this guy looks at us and says,
I'll be watching you, pretty ladies.
I book it out of that gas station and onto the main road. The whole drive there I was a nervous wreck, but settled down once we had made it there. The concert was awesome, and nothing happened the whole time we were there. We enjoyed loading up on soda, cotton candy, and funnel cakes. We rode a few rides and bought a few things from the vendors, even played a few games and won some prizes. By the time everything was finished, it was about 11 p.m., and since we weren't staying the night at the campgrounds, we decided to go. We take one of the golf carts back to the area where the car was parked and started to try to find it. Mel yells, "Found it!" really loud so we would come to her, and then she screams. We run over to her as fast as our legs would carry us. We were trying to talk to her, not noticing anything else at the moment, and she couldn't say anything except point at the car. We look at the car, and written in what appeared to be something red, my guess was animal blood, was the words, "I see you." I pulled my cell phone out from my pocket and called the local police department. They came out and inspected everything, and we told them about the guy and gave his description. Their best guess was that he had followed us and just wanted to scare 3 young women for the incident we had at the ATM. Well, his little scare prank worked. I was scared beyond belief. After that night, none of us have seen this guy again. We don't know where he came from, but super creepy good old boy, please stay away from me and my friends, and let's never meet again. I am a 45-year-old male who lives in a small rural community in Wyoming. I believe there are only about 6,000 people who live in my community. You would never imagine in a town as small as this one that anybody would have to worry about having a stalker, or at least I didn't think so. That was until, much to my horror, I discovered I had one. Let me preface this by saying until I became a published author back in 2013, I was just another friendly face in the crowd, so to speak. Granted, I am well known in my community because I work at the local hospital and have for many years. At the time, I was working as the training coordinator for the front office staff for our medical clinic as well as the hospital. Getting my first book published generated a great deal of press in my hometown and statewide. The fact I quickly rose to a 5-star rating on Amazon only generated more press and interviews, therefore, more attention. Then, when my second book came out in 2015, all of a sudden I was the local celebrity. Being somewhat humble, I was appreciative that the publicity helped me sell a lot of books, but I was uncomfortable by all the attention. Local folks would come to the hospital just to have me sign their books. This is where my stalker story begins. On this particular day, I am up in our medical office building where I was training a new hire, when a rather large biker dude with long stringy blonde hair covered in tattoos approached the front counter where I was standing. I smiled and greeted him with a warm hello and "How can I help you?" I was under the impression that he was there to check for an appointment. He smiled and admitted that he did not have an appointment that day, but was wondering if I would autograph the copies of my books that he had with him. Not wanting to be rude, I said I would be more than happy and had him follow me down to the end of the counter so that we would not be in anybody's way. To be honest, I was a bit surprised he bought them considering they were gay-themed supernatural thrillers. I guess he just didn't strike me as the type of guy that would read anything that was gay-themed. Regardless, I thanked him for purchasing the books and signed them for him. He thanked me and left, and I didn't give it any more thought. Until a few weeks later, he showed up at the hospital where I was again, at the front desk doing some training, and asked me to sign 2 more books he said he had purchased for a friend. I again thanked him and signed the books. Fast forward a few months, and I'm filling in as the receptionist for one of our other clinics in a small town about 30 miles away from my hometown. The receptionist scheduled to work had called in sick that day, so I agreed to fill in for her. It was shortly after lunch when, guess who walks in with my books in hand? None other than Mr. Biker. Being at work, I remained polite and again signed the book, and he was on his way. Feeling truly creeped out and concerned, I spoke with the nurse on duty as well as the provider and expressed my concerns. They dismissed it as none other than an obvious fan who must have a little crush and nothing more. I figured they were probably right and went about my day. The weeks went by and I began to notice this large guy hanging out in front of my house and in back of the alley behind it. He always wore a hoodie and so I couldn't see who it was. I pointed this out to my husband, who reminded me that with the house up for sale, he was probably just someone who was either interested in buying it or a looky-loo. Then one day, my mother, who lives right across the alley from me, called me while I was out of town on a book tour to tell me that some strange guy in a hoodie was casing my house and peering in the windows. I told her it was probably a potential buyer and not to worry about it. Fast forward a few months. I am back at the medical office building in our urgent care training another new hire when I get a call from one of the girls in central scheduling. She tells me she has a guy on the line who keeps calling and asking me but refuses to identify himself or why he needs to speak with me. Thinking it was a patient that had an issue of a more sensitive nature, I told her to go ahead and patch him through. I quickly discovered he was not needing an appointment, nor did he have any medical concerns. He began telling me that he was naked and jerking off. He wanted me to know he was thinking of me and began to tell me all of the sick and twisted things he was going to do to me if he ever got me alone. I was thinking, what the fuck is wrong with this guy? I was flipping the fuck out at this point, but somehow still managed to keep my voice calm and informed the pervert to never call me again, otherwise I would notify the police. Unbeknownst to me, the clinic manager was standing behind me and asked me what was going on. I explained the phone call and what the creep said. The manager was concerned and felt we needed to notify the police immediately. I met with a few officers and explained what had happened. They asked me if I might know this person, and at the time, I had no clue who it was. The next morning, I received a call from a local detective who asked me if I would stop by his office before I went to work. He said he had more information on the guy who called me the day before. I agreed to meet him and called the clinic manager to let him know what was going on and that I would be in as soon as I was done talking with the detective. Upon reaching his office, I was invited in and the detective got up from his desk and shut the door. He informed me they did a search of the number the guy called in from and came up with some rather disturbing information. He went on to explain that after learning who the guy was, the detective had done some digging, including interviewing some folks this guy associates with. What the detective told me next made all the hair on my body stand on end and sent my heart crashing to the floor. I was informed this guy had been watching, or stalking me rather, for over 6 months. Not only that, but he believes this guy has been in my house. I was shaking with fear and finding it hard to breathe. I began to pace the floor of this rather small office. I explained I don't even have a clue who this guy is or what he looks like. That's when the detective turned his computer monitor around and showed me who it was. It was Biker Dude. My blood ran cold and I felt like I was going to pass out. When I could collect myself, I began to explain how he had been in my yard, in the front and the back. He had been sitting in front of my house on the street. I also told him I have seen him walking up and down the alley between my mother's house and mine. The detective informed me this guy was a well-known gang member and drug dealer from California and has been living in my hometown dealing drugs here for a year now. He told me I needed to make sure all my doors and windows are locked at all times and always have somebody walk with me to my vehicle and never go anywhere alone. He said this guy has been accused of threatening to kill a witness in previous drug offenses, and that is why he was still in the street, so to speak. Then, much to my surprise and horror, the detective asked me if I would be willing to befriend this guy and help the cops set up a drug sting operation. I was mortified and angry, to say the least. I told him I needed time to absorb all of this and get back to him. My manager and the CEO of the hospital met with me when I got back to work that day, and I told him everything. An organization-wide email went out with the guy's picture along with an alert asking that the CEO, clinic manager, and I be notified if the creep was spotted in any of the facilities. We are a small hospital, so to speak, so we have no security. 2 weeks went by and things seemed to calm down. My husband and I had gone out for the evening and reminded our roommate that if he left the house to be sure all the doors were locked. We had already made him aware of the situation. He had seen the guy sitting in front of the house on several occasions but just shrugged it off. I needed to get out for a bit because I felt like a trapped rat. It was a great night, and for a while, I was able to forget about it all. Upon returning to the house, much to my relief, the front door was still locked. I walked through the house to the back door, and it too was locked. Our roommate was sound asleep in his room. I breathed a sigh of relief and made my way to the bedroom. As I walked into the room, I noticed my husband was reading something, and he was white as a sheet. I asked him what was wrong, and he handed me the sheet of paper, saying it was under my pillow. Then he got up and began looking in the closets and under the bed. Then he went through the entire house while I read in horror. The letter said,
Hello, sexy. Nice house. I love the smell of your pillow. I hope you don't mind, but I borrowed a few of your sexy things. I will return them when I have added my own scent to them. Don't bother contacting the police. I know when your mother is home alone. I know your roommate's schedule as well as your husband's. By the way, your roommate is a very sound sleeper. I will be seeing you soon.
I called the police, but they said there was nothing they could do since he was no longer in the house and I could not prove it was him because he never signed the note. I was shitting bricks because I could still not figure out how he had gotten in. Another few weeks go by and I begin to realize I am seeing him everywhere. At the grocery store, at the pharmacy, I mean everywhere I went, he was always there lurking in the distance. It had gotten to the point I was now on medications to help me sleep, and antidepressants because I felt like I was losing my mind. I couldn't function because the cops kept saying they couldn't do a thing about it unless he harmed me or he was caught in my home. Sitting in front of our house for hours on end in the alley is not illegal. This went on for over a year. Where I work, a professional job, I maintained my bubbly outward appearance in public, but I hid like a timid little mouse behind locked doors at night, too afraid to leave my house. One night about 6 months ago, my husband and I awoke to lights flashing and people hollering outside. It sounded like they were right outside on the front lawn. Peeking through the drapes, I discovered that they were right outside. They had some guy on the ground ordering him not to move. The fire department was there putting out a large 15-gallon gas can that had been lit on fire and placed on my front step. We threw our robes on and rushed outside where we were met by several police officers. They had the biker guy on the ground in cuffs. One of the officers informed me that one of the neighbors across the street had called, reporting a suspicious character lurking in my front yard who was carrying what appeared to be a rather large gas can. The officer also pointed out that all the tires on my car had been slashed. He went on to explain that the bike dude had placed the gas can on my front step and lit it on fire. My heart was pounding so hard in my chest I thought I was going to literally die of a massive coronary right there. I lost it and broke down sobbing. My husband, on the other hand, blew up. He was beyond angry. I was too, but I was too overwhelmed with the fact that if our neighbors had not been up and called the police, we could have been killed. Bike Dude is now behind bars, but was only sentenced to 2 years on a plea deal. The scariest thing about that is the police nor the state are required to notify me in the event that this creep is released. So, Mr. Biker Dude, I pray and pray hard we never, ever meet again.